Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Yun, and we have another addition to our interview series for Pride Month 2022. Hello, would you like to introduce yourself with your name and pronouns?
Hi, I'm Nathaniel or Astro. I use he, they pronouns and sometimes other neo pronouns, but that's a work in progress.
Out of curiosity, what other neo pronouns are you testing out?
I'm exploring like it's, and fey fair. Some of them are a little confusing, I guess, with like grammar. So I'm just kind of seeing like testing the waters, see what feels good. Nice,
that's very cool. Can you please share a little bit about your background growing up?
I grew up in kind of like a mixed household. My dad is from the US and my mom is from Turkey. So I've got both like the individualistic culture and the collectivistic culture. Being raised by both parents was interesting. There's also like the double languages. Not a lot of language in terms of identity, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty much what it was like. I moved around a lot too. And then I eventually moved to Texas, and then that's where we met.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were younger, was there a particular moment where you thought, oh, maybe I'm a little different, or there's something going on with me? A little.
I know a lot of people, they will have this like aha moment where they're like, yeah, I've known since I was really young. I definitely have moments that I can look back on and be like, oh, that's pretty obvious. But at the time, it was not obvious to me. It's really hard to identify something within yourself when you don't have that language. And I was never taught any language in regards to identity. It was very much given to me who I was expected to be. But I don't think I really knew in terms of like identity within the queer community until maybe late junior high school, maybe freshman year of high school. Pretty much by the time I moved to Texas is when I finally was like Googling like, am I gay? And taking all the quizzes.
Classic, the quizzes.
Right, yeah. So growing up, the internet was still super new, and I would look up, like for me, why do I have penis envy? You know, why am I trying to like pack and stuff? And at the time, like the Google searches were coming up with, women don't get that. Like, you're just weird type of thing.
Not even like, trans man? They were just like...
No, nothing with trans.
Wow.
I didn't get a single search with transgender in it. So no. I never even got that, even when I looked it up on the internet. So nowadays you can Google something that's a little sus, you know, and something will come up. But when I did, nothing came up. So I didn't have that language until college, I think.
Wow.
So it took me a minute.
I mean, that's not your fault though. Like you said, if there's no example, sometimes you feel like, am I having real feelings, or is this, you know, they're real because they're persistent and they don't go away. But it's like, what do I even do with it all? Yeah. You started doing internal questioning more in college. Were there any other milestones?
I went through the whole, you know, like, oh, maybe I'm bisexual. Maybe I'm a lesbian. I didn't start questioning my gender till college, so I started binding in college a little bit, and I didn't really understand why I was doing that. I already have like a pretty flat chest. College is when I first met another trans guy, or a trans guy, you know? And that was like mind-blowing, because a lot of people, when they talk about transgender, a lot of the news is on trans women, and I would like ask questions to them and everything. But I felt kind of bad because it didn't really feel like it was my territory to ask questions about. You know, like I didn't want to take something from someone. It almost felt like I was not allowed to ask questions about it, just because I wasn't trans at the time, supposedly. And I kind of went through a hyper femme stage because growing up, there's a lot of expectations for people who are assigned female at birth to be hyper feminine and dress a certain way and act a certain way in society, especially in Turkey, right? The gender norms are very binary and very restrictive. So I tried my best to be the perfect woman, and it still felt really bad. I felt bad for being bad at being a woman. I thought maybe it's because of like the people I'm with, like the relationships that I was into. I was only identifying as a lesbian. So I thought maybe it's just men. Maybe I'm not into men. And that was definitely not the case. I actually got into meditation shortly after, and I got to a point where I was like, okay, meditating's great for like my mental health and everything, but I need to figure my gender shit out. Like, there's definitely something there that you haven't been looking into and you've been avoiding this whole time, and you need to do like your actual research now, especially since the resources are finally there for you. For my culture, the sexuality was like a big no-no. My parents were kind of just like, okay, like, you're obviously pretty dead set on being pansexual and this whole gay stuff or whatever. And then coming out as trans, they were like, can't you just be a regular lesbian or whatever? Like, we can deal with that, but the trans stuff, we're not, no. So we're not there yet.
So it was harder for your parents to come to terms with the transgender part of your identity, or the gender part of your identity.
I didn't have a moment specifically where I was like, sit down and tell my parents, like, come out to them with my gender identity. I had been in therapy for my gender for almost a year. I wrote a letter. I invited my mom to one of my sessions, and I read that letter to her. She didn't take it very well. I actually ended up going to Turkey almost immediately after, so I never got a chance to read that letter to my dad as well. She was like, I'm going to tell your father. Obviously, she was going to tell him in her own words, which is kind of like an uneducated way to go about it. Everything pretty much went fine up until I came back. And at that point, I ended up going to a trans protest at the Capitol. I happened to meet a group of people who just were super welcoming. They were all trans and queer and everything, and it was just a really awesome experience because I had spent the previous year isolated with myself and my parents. So it was really cool to just see people living their life, being themselves, and kind of reminding myself who I am and who I can be. I was telling them, these people, how I was worried that I was going to get kicked out of the house because of my gender identity. They were just so welcoming and like generous and stuff. Like, I seriously thought I was going to cry. If I hadn't already started tea and like kind of nulled my crying senses, I probably would have cried there. But they pretty much were like, if you need anything, like, we got you. The time did come where they got to prove it, because my parents were like, what's going on with you and stuff? And I told them, like, look, I'm trans, and that's what I've been going through, and that's who I am. I knew I would get a very direct response from my dad. He pretty much straight out the gate was like, we're not going to support you. And I was like, well, thanks for telling me. Like, I appreciate that. My mom took the more indirect approach and said some inappropriate things and some things trying to intentionally hurt me. Of course, at this point, given our relationship, I don't really take those things personally anymore. I ended up moving out that same day, and I was able to stay at a friend's house. A good growing opportunity, I think.
I'm really sorry to hear about this. Obviously, I think it's every queer person's kind of like worst case scenario. You do have a lot of people who love you and care about you and are willing to lend a helping hand. And I'm, of course, one of those people, but it sucks so much that so many queer people, especially young adults or queer people in high school or middle school, have to worry about this and have to plan for it and keep it as in the back of their mind, a just in case. Do you have any advice for anyone else who might be preparing for an outcome like this or going through something like this, considering it's a very difficult thing to go through?
I grew up being super dependent on my parents, and so I didn't really get to learn how to take care of myself as an adult. It seems obvious, but knowing your local resources, even just like a simple Google search, knowing who can provide support in terms of transportation, in terms of food and housing, so that you're not ending up homeless, essentially, and on the streets. I've had a lot of help from my local resources, and also just my other queer friends, like offering like, hey, you can sleep on my couch. Hey, you can stay at my place for however long. Obviously, all your friends want to be there for you, but like sometimes they can't support you in the ways that you might need. So just knowing like who can help you like with housing, or who knows someone who can help you get what you need, type of thing. Definitely diving into the queer community, because since so many of us go through it, a lot of us have already done that research so that you don't have to struggle in finding those resources. Also, I was going to say, knowing who can support you mentally. Mentally, it is the worst thing to go through by yourself. You definitely need like your friends in your corner and like good distractions from all of the heavy shit that you have to go through. You definitely need to have like those breaks just to hang out with your friends and not necessarily pretend that everything is fine, but just to be able to have moments where you can laugh and remember like what you're doing this for and who you're doing this for, you know, yourself. You got to take care of yourself.
Well, thank you so much for being honest and sharing like this very personal, big part of your life. It's very important that people who do get kicked out of their home, ostracized from their family, lose their jobs, any type of, you know, really life-changing discrimination essentially is what it is, that we don't forget why we have Pride Month, and we don't forget why there's so much work left to be done. Because unfortunately, some people think there's no more work left to be done, and they couldn't be more wrong. It's like, clearly you're not exposed to the community, or you're not paying attention. So
that's definitely a privilege that some people are not aware that they have.
All right. Well, this was great. Thank you again so much for being on this interview series, and thank you to everyone who has watched all the way through. You can check out the other videos that I've made for this series on a playlist that I'm going to put up on the screen, and come check out my channel if you like queer stuff. And see you next time. Bye. As you know this, because when we went to Houston Pride, I almost fainted, yes. And you did a very good job of being my protector and being like, everyone move, they need to lay down, we need to get the water going. Like, yeah. You did an awesome job. So
the only part I remember is hopping onto that construction like site type of thing and like viewing the parade at night.
We had
just because I was so like
view.
Awesome.
Yeah,
we did. We had like the best view.
that was sick. Up against the chain link fence, standing on the orange construction block. Like,